Welcome back to our penultimate session of DevCon 2022. I'm Dave McCormick, your host, and I'm joined right now by Bob Moore, our VP of Mobility. Bob has actually pre-recorded his session, so I'm going to go play that now without further ado, but the standard warning applies. Sometimes the audio is much louder than the standard GoToWebinar session, so especially if you're wearing headphones, just maybe turn down the volume right now just a smidge. All right, so let's get going.
Hi, everyone. This is Bob Moore. I'm VP of Mobile Development for Alpha Software. And in this discussion, we'll take a look at what's going on with Cordova mobile app development in 2022. I'm going to start with an overview of the Cordova app architecture. It's important to understand it when you get into situations where you need to debug both JavaScript and native code. We'll take a look at the Alpha Cordova App Builder Genie revisions. I'll go through some installation tips for Cordova Android 11. And we'll take a look at working with Android Studio. We'll take a look at debugging and using the Cordova CLI along with Android Studio. Then we'll take a look at working with Cordova apps with Xcode. And then I'll discuss some of the work I've got in progress. Okay, the Cordova architecture, what is it? Well, we're building native applications here. So we're building Android and iOS native applications. But the application is a web view. So it's a native control, it's a native framework. In iOS, it is WK WebView. And in Android, it's just a web view. But these are Chromeless browsers, if you will. And they have the restrictions of typical browsers in terms of cross-site scripting and cores and so on like that. They communicate with the native side through plugins. And the plugins have a bidirectional channel. So we've got a channel that initiates JavaScript, and that initiates a native functionality. And then we can pass information back from the native side to the JavaScript side and back to the web view. So it's quite powerful. The plugins themselves are typically written in Android native source, iOS native code, and then JavaScript. So there's literally, you typically are writing three different components that make up a plugin. That's not necessarily always true. Our WK WebView plugin is only for iOS, but in general, most of the plugins are going to be written for Android and iOS. And of course, those plugins now have native capabilities. So now we can talk directly to the native hardware, and in fact, we can use the native frameworks. So this gives you an incredible amount of capability. It's really only limited by your skill and your imagination. You've got full access to the services and the sensors, input graphics, and all of the libraries and frameworks that are supported on the native side of things. So that's quite powerful. So for the Alpha Cordova App Builder Genie in 2022, one of the first things that we did was add support for Xcode CLI build. So this is for apps that you're building iOS apps on a Mac, and we are now generating the code that will script the whole build process out. So it will just build the whole thing in the same way we do with Android. And you can choose to have the application install automatically in a simulator or on the device. So it's a very similar experience to what we have right now for Android. So that's been added into the builder for iOS and Xcode apps. We added support for Cordova CLI 11. All of the major releases of Cordova include versions that are specific for iOS and versions that are specific for Android. So think of the CLI 11 as a full wrapper of a whole bunch of other versions, right? So Cordova CLI 11 supports Cordova Android 10.x.x and Cordova iOS 6.2.0. So this can be a little confusing. And when you see the next added support for Cordova Android 11, well, that is actually not part of any major release of the Cordova CLI. So we added support. This is fairly recent, the support for Cordova Android 11. And what we'll do is if you indicate that you want to build with Cordova Android 11, we just include it. It happens automatically. We added support for Ionic App Flow in CLI 11 and support for Ionic App Flow in Cordova Android 11. So if you want to build apps, use Ionic App Flow and build Android apps that are submitted to the Google Play Store, by all means you can do that. Now we'll take a look at, in the next series, I'm going to show you some stuff on the builder. We'll show you how the builder in operation and some of the changes. In this segment, we're going to take a look at some changes that have been made to the Cordova App Builder Genie in order to accommodate Cordova Android 11. So if we open up the builder, you'll notice that we now are prompting you for the installed Cordova version. The latest Cordova version is CLI 11. And remember that this version and the version of the Cordova Android or Cordova iOS don't necessarily correspond to the release of the Cordova version. So for example, Cordova version 11 includes Cordova Android version 10. And so Cordova Android version 11 isn't bundled in any of the specific Cordova versions. So that's an important distinction for you to know. You actually have to pick that you want to use Cordova 11 to build the app. Now that is the version that is required if you want to put your app in the Google Play Store. And it is really the one you want to use if you're going to support Android 12. Now, some of the changes that you're going to see here are the Cordova Android 11 splash screen. So if we pick 10, that's going to go away, and you've got the regular splash screens, which are in portrait and landscape mode, and you can generate the Android 9 patch splash screens. But this is one of the big changes to Cordova Android 11, was the way they did the splash screen. So it's quite different. Now we support one 2732 by 2732 image. It has to be center weighted, because what it's going to do is put a circle around it. It's going to center it in the screen, and you can control the background of the splash screen, the duration. So you can say, oh, I want the background of the splash screen itself to be, whatever. It needs to be in hex. Be careful here, because this can let you change it to RGB or whatever. But this needs to be a hex number. And then you can also set the splash screen icon background. Again, by default, this is going to be white, but you can set that to be anything you like. And then the target SDK version. In this case, if we're going after the latest, use 32 here. You can use 31 and still submit to the Google Play Store, but 32 is the recommended setting here. Now, nothing else has really changed too much in here. Some of the plugins that are loaded are a bit different. I know that the barcode scanner plugin, the version that's in NPM and the version that is published through Cordova doesn't work with Cordova Android 11. So I forked that and did a special version. And when you tell us that you're going to use Cordova Android 11, we're going to go ahead and load that, and that comes directly from, that's called Cordova Plugin Alpha Barcode Scanner. And if we find anything else in any of the other plugins, we will do our best to make sure that they work. Then from here, just save and launch. go right to the builder itself. You'll see that it's going to generate the Android 11 splash screen. And the only real change in here for Android is going to be this checkbox right here, Build App with Cordova Android 11. We need to know that you want to use Cordova Android 11 here because we will force it and we will force that load. So, and I'll show you that as we do the build. And everything else is pretty much the same. So you might want to take a look at the config XML file. If you are used to this and you're used to this whole, what this looks like, it's going to look a little different now. For Cordova Android 11, you'll see these Cordova Android 11 options in here. So we're setting that up for you with a splash screen and so on. Now there's one thing in here that you'll notice that's kind of odd, and that is this preference name called Android Windows Splash Screen Animated Icon. And you'll see that the value is this value that we generate this image and we call it that particular name. But that's how you tell Android 11 that this is my splash screen. So it's just kind of a funny thing there. And everything else is pretty straightforward. You'll notice in here that when you're looking at the screens, the Splash platform screens, the whole Android section is gone. It's not there. So there's just that one 2732 by 2732 image, and that's it. So anyway, let's go ahead and get rid of that and go ahead and build the app. Now, we tried to make this a bit nicer to give you a little bit more information, added color to it this year. And also we're trying to present all the information to you without it just scrolling away and disappearing. So there are certain areas when if it has a problem, I can't really stop it, but it is something that we're trying to give you as much information as we can. Notice that we're using Cordova Android 11 here. So that's important. And notice that we're using the Android Target SDK of Android 32. Again, that's important as well. And our build is finally complete. You can see we generated the APK file. Now what I'm going to do is load this up onto my Android device so we can take a look at the new splash screen. Then I'm going to go through the installation of Cordova Android 11 so that you know how to set up Android Studio and you know how to install the proper versions of Java and the proper versions of Gradle that you're going to need to build apps for Cordova Android 11. Next, we'll take a look at my Android devices, a Pixel 6. I'm going to launch the app. You notice I use a light blue background. You see the Alpha Software logo in the center. I'm going to scan a barcode here, accessing the native functionality of the device. Scan that in, and we'll display it on the screen. Let's take a look at that one more time. I'm going to close out this application, and we'll launch it again. So you can see the splash screen. This is the big change in Android 11. And there we see it. And we'll close the app. So in this segment, I wanted to cover some of the changes that we made to the iOS builder as well this year. We added the ability now to use the Xcode CLI. So there's two build target options. One is Xcode. That means that you're going to take this project, you're going to load it into Xcode, and from there, you're going to publish it or do whatever you need to do. Obviously, we're building an iOS app, and it has to be done on a Mac. But Xcode CLI, what this does is it's very similar to the way that we build the apps for Android. You can select the build type. You can say install and run after build, and you could deploy to a device or you can deploy to a simulator. So it totally automates the whole process here. Code signing identity, you just leave that at iPhone developer. And in here, you have to put your development team number. This is in the ID is in the upper right-hand corner of the Apple Developer Certificates and Identifiers page. That's part of your account. And then, what kind of package type do you want? So there's a explainer video on this that I did in the documentation. So if you do a search for the CLI builder and you look for the iOS build options, you'll see that this is all documented in here. And as you go through it, it pretty much describes everything that you need to do. And then we've got a explainer video here as well. So there's plenty there for you to absorb. And this is kind of a really nice feature because it just really kind of automates the whole thing in the same way we do with Android. Let's take a look at some of the installation tips for Cordova Android 11. So we'll be going through these tips, and then I'll go through the actual changes that I'm going to make to the environment variables and so on, the path, and then to Android Studio. But the first thing you need to understand is we need to use Android Home for the environment variable. In previous releases of the Android for Cordova, we've used Android underbar SDK. So Cordova Android 11 now requires Android underbar Home. This was a change that was made by the folks at Android. So if you want to support Cordova Android 10 and Cordova Android 11, you can use set up an environment variable for Android Home and also set one up for Android underbar SDK. But I'll show you that in just a bit. Cordova Android 11 requires Gradle 7.4.2. This is a change. This is a breaking change, actually, from Cordova Android 10. You can choose to install Gradle 7.4.2 on your own, and I will show you how to do that, or you can use the version of Gradle that is going to be installed as part of an Android Studio installation. And I'll show you how to do that as well. This is important. Any of the Cordova Android 11 apps, again, this is a breaking change. They require Android Build Tools version 32, and I'll show you how to make sure that you're using those and how they're installed. And Cordova Android 11 uses the Android Gradle plugin 7.2.1. So that plugin is part of Android Studio. And again, I'll show you how to make sure you're using that. And Cordova Android 11 doesn't require the splash tags in the config XML file. We automatically remove all of the Android splash tags. They won't be there. We'll just be referencing one image for the splash screen. The whitelist plugin is no longer supported for Cordova Android 11. We'll remove it if it's there. Android X, so the Android X libraries have to be enabled. We'll automatically enable that as well. And the splash screen plugin is no longer supported in Cordova Android 11, so we will not allow that to be installed as well. Next, we'll take a look at all of this. In this segment, we're going to go over pretty much all the things that could trip you up with configuring Android Studio to work with Cordova Android 11, because there are breaking changes in there. Everything that we're going to go over here is documented very well in the Cordova CLI Builder help. So if you go into the Alpha help and just do a search on Cordova CLI Builder, you're going to get this documentation. It will go through this step by step: how to install the Java SE development kit, how to install Gradle. This is actually optional, and I will show you why. Installing Git, Node.js, Cordova, and Android Studio. This is all really pretty straightforward. It gets a little confusing with some of the things that you have to do inside of Android Studio to configure it correctly, but I'll go over all of that with you. And then, of course, setting up your environment variables. This can trip you up as well. We're going to define some specific system variables to point to the Android SDK home, and we can do the Gradle home and the Java home. Again, this is all documented in here, but we'll take a look at it, and also editing the system path so that all of this works the way it should. So we'll look at it. I don't think it's overly confusing, but we'll try to touch on what may be confusing. So I'm in the search box now, and you can't see that because it's not being recorded, but it's I'm typing in env, and that's going to bring up the environment variables. And I'm going to check on this right here. And you're going to notice that I've got my Android home specified at C users, my name, there's a hidden folder called App Data. Then we go into Local Android SDK. This is where it will install by default. It's going to go into your user directory, and this is where the SDK gets installed. I've also specified Gradle Home here. Notice that it's specified as C Gradle 7.5.1. And if we were to take a look at my drive and go to my C drive, we're going to see that it's there. Whether I choose to use it or not is a separate issue, but let's go ahead and see it. And there's Gradle 7.5.1, and here's all the files associated with it. Now, let's also go down and take a look at my system and my path, because this is really important. The way you set this up is important. If we take a look at this, notice I've got my Java home specified and then my Android home, and I'm looking under platform tools and tool/bin, and notice where I have Gradle. So Gradle home is right here. This you can choose to define this if you'd like. And what's going to happen is then that version of Gradle is going to be used for the build, and it's the version that's in this Android home directory. And notice I've got the other one underneath it. So when the operating system does its search for Gradle, it's going to find this one first in this configuration. And I'm going to show you what that means. So let's go ahead and say, okay, that's wonderful, and everything's good. So now we're going to go to launch a command prompt, and we're going to say, okay, what version of Gradle is installed? And I would think, oh, I've got that 7.5 version installed, so that's probably what I should see. So if I go Gradle-V, notice it says 6.3. And this confused me for quite some time. Like, where is it pulling that from? Well, it's pulling it from the Android installation directory. That's the version of Gradle that's installed there. If I wanted to use the 7.5.1 version, I would have to move that. If I were actually, watch, I'll show you, I'll do it. So if we come into the, let's go into our environment variables here. And again, I just typed in env in the search box there, and we'll come into our path and we'll modify it. So we'll edit our path, and we're going to move this Gradle home up. Just move it up. So now it will resolve ahead of this one, ahead of the one that's in the Android SDK, and say, okay, all right. And then we'll go ahead and launch terminal again and type in Gradle -V so we can see the version, and now it's 7.5.1. So that's the solution to the mystery there. But the thing that's interesting about the whole thing is here now I'm going to launch Android Studio, and I'm running Dolphin 2021.3.1, which is the latest release of Android Studio. And if you had previously opened a project up, it would be here. But I'm going to go ahead over here and go to the SDK manager, and we're going to take a look at how I've got this set up. So, and this is important, the Android SDK here, we're going to be targeting API level 32. So you need to make sure that that's installed. You check that. And you can install other versions if you want, as many as you'd like. It's really going to consume disk space. That's all you're really doing here. And then we have to look at the SDK tools, and Cordova Android 11 requires 32. So I've got that checked, and I've got 32.1.0 release candidate 1 installed as well, and then the older version of 30.0.3. So that's something else that you can just pick 32 if you want, or if you want to also use Cordova Android 10, use 30.0.3. And you'll be good there. That's about all we actually need to do there. I wanted to just show you one other thing. Now notice the Android SDK location. So it's telling me this is where this is located. All right. And now we're going to just launch a project. I'm going to show you how to do that. So this would be a Cordova project that that was generated with the Alpha Cordova app builder. I'm going to just say open, because we're going to open up an existing project. All right. Now all of my projects go into this folder called CLI test. And let's open up the barcode scan one. So if I open up that folder, come into platforms, click on Android. This is all of my Android files right here. So let's go ahead and open it. It'll load the components. This can take some time because it's going to go through a Gradle build process. And what happens here is if Gradle 7.4.2 is not installed, it'll download it. So that's kind of nice. Now this has already been opened once before, so this happened very, very quickly. But if it's a new project and Gradle 7.4.2 is not installed, it will install it. It's installed. When you build a Cordova app, Cordova builds a wrapper that tells Android Studio exactly what to do for the Gradle file, which is really good. Now you'll notice here, project update recommended. The Android Gradle plugin can be upgraded. So let me explain what that is. The Android Gradle plugin is a wrapper for Android Studio for Gradle. And remember, Gradle is what it uses to build apps. It's like Make used to be back when we wrote C code. So you can upgrade this if you want, or you can disregard it. It doesn't really matter. If you say you want to upgrade it, you'll say begin the upgrade, and you can say upgrade to 7.2 to 7.3. Sometimes this can break things. In this case, it won't, but I'm not going to worry about it at this point. And right now you're good to go. So right now we've got Android Studio configured properly. We've got it set up to build this project, and we should be in really good shape. So in this segment, I am going to show you a little bit about how to debug both on the native side with Android Studio and on the JavaScript side. So I've built this project that's got some known problems in it. I've got a JavaScript error in my scan barcode debug component. If I open it up, and we take a look at the on Cordova ready event, I've got a function called order pizza. Well, that doesn't exist, so that will cause a JavaScript error when this thing goes to load. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to include a plugin that I know is going to fail. This actually is something I had to fix recently, so this is sort of the process that I went through to solve this problem. So I've got it won't compile. So let's go ahead and build this application. We're going to use Cordova Android version 11. We're using the scan barcode debug component with the known JavaScript error in it. I'm going to go ahead and save and launch the CLI builder. We're going to do an Android build here. I'm going to take a look at my config XML file to make sure that I have got the right plugins. Yeah, this one I got to remove because this one's the good one. That's the one that's been fixed. And here's the old PhoneGap plugin for the barcode scanner. We're going to go ahead and save that. And we're going to go ahead and say build the app. Now, when we're building this app, I'm going to try to catch this error, but in this case, I can't catch it. I'll see some errors, and you'll see these errors coming in here, but the screen eventually will just go away because it's failing in a place that I can't catch it. So far, so good. Everything seems to be going along just fine. Our first build is successful, and then all of a sudden it fails. And it's a Gradle failure, something in the build process. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to open the same project up in Android Studio, so see if we can figure out what's going on. So here we go, and that's going to be this barcode scanner project. Go ahead and open it up. It's going to try to do a build, and it's going to fail. And we're going to see this error right in here. Now, if we jump up here, Android failed, it's going to give us a little bit more information. So let's scroll up and see if we can figure out exactly what went on here. So it says the build failed with an exception where in this script right here. So this is the barcode scanner dash barcode scanner dot Gradle line 9. Okay, so let's go find that. So here's our barcode scanner, and here's our barcode scanner Gradle file. Well, let's go ahead and open that up. And let's take a look at line 9. So line 9 says compile, and here it's trying to pull in some assets. So this is odd. So this used to work. So we know this worked in previous versions of this plugin, but it doesn't work in this version. So what's different about this version? Well, remember, we're going to be using a different version of Gradle here. So my inclination was to say, okay, possibly there's a problem with this compiled dependency under the version of Gradle that we're using here. So what I'm going to do is go out and we're going to go to Google, and now Google's our friend, right? So we're going to do a search and say, we're going to say a Gradle compile dependency failed in Gradle 7.4.2. Yep, that's what I want to know about. And I see a few things here. And let's see. Oh, what is this? So this is the one that pointed me in the right direction right here. So I saw this and said, So implementation versus compiled dependencies. So Gradle 6 supports both implementation and compile. But now, it's been deprecated. So now it's deprecated. And now I should be using the implementation dependency. So let's go back to the code and let's give that a try. So instead of compile, we're going to change this. So I'm going to change this to implementation. Implementation. We're just replacing the compile with implementation as described here. And sure enough, that change allowed me to build this application. So right now I've got a successful build of our project. We were able to debug into what was going on with loading a specific plugin, and we were able to fix it. Okay, so now let's see if we can run this app on my Pixel 6. So that's selected here. We'll say, okay, go ahead and run this thing. Now remember, I know I've got a JavaScript error in here. More than likely this will load, but I won't see my alert that should be coming up that says order pizza when I launch the app, because that should fire on Cordova ready. So we'll see how that goes. Launching the app. And I never saw anything to tell me to order pizza. So I know I got a problem here. So what we would do right now is we're looking for a JavaScript error. And the easiest way to do that is going to be with the with Google's debugger. So here I've done an inspection for my devices and I can see the web view in my app. So I'm going to say inspect. And there, sure enough, we see it right here. Order pizza is not defined. So we've got a problem here. So what can we do? Can we solve that problem right here just because we're here and we want to test and I don't want to go through the whole process of building this again? Yeah, we sure can. So watch, if I come over here into, first let's stop the app from running, and we're going to come into our assets. And these are the generated assets of the Cordova application. The index.html file right here is the file that Alpha would generate. And so, well, I already did a search on this. So I would come in, do a search, and order pizza. That's what I'm looking for. I see one result. Let's go find it. There it is. Now, if I had defined this function, there'd be more than one result, right? So there'd be something else here. So rather than use that right now, just what I'll do is I'll just drop an alert in here. So we're editing this code, and we'll just say alert, and we'll say order pizza. So now we've dropped our alert in there directly, and we'll go ahead and save that. And now we'll go ahead and run this app again. But we just see a blank screen. So this is a bad situation. We didn't even see the splash screen come up. And the reason is, if you look at the way I entered this in, I used a quote here and a single quote here and a double quote here. Boy, that looks really bad, right? And some of you might have seen situations like this where you go to launch an app and the splash screen never even showed up. So let's go back to our debugger and see if we can see something here. Oh, we got an uncaught syntax error, invalid or expected token. So now this is really messy, right? So let's see if I can see where that happened. In index HTML 405. So let's go back to our application here. And sure enough, there it is on line 405. Oh, boy, did I make a mistake there, right? So now we'll go ahead and fix that. And we're going to stop the app from running. And let's go ahead and start it up again. Oh, there it is. It worked. So order pizza is there. And let's see if our barcode scanner works. Our plugin, does our plugin work? And sure enough, our plugin's going to work as well. And there it is. So what we've done here is we've solved two problems. We had a problem with a plugin that would not compile. We fixed that. We had a missing JavaScript function. Then we edited the file and made a syntax error and saw a white screen, nothing going on there. And then we went in and fixed that. So that was a good exercise to understand how to troubleshoot both native code and to troubleshoot JavaScript code. Now what I'd like to do next is let's take a look at doing something a little bit different for this project. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So we'll just close this. And we're going to terminate the running process. And I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way for the time being. And we're going to just minimize Android Studio. We're going to get rid of this. We're going to get rid of our debugger. And in this case, I'm going to also get rid of this alpha window here. And what we're going to do is we're going to launch a command prompt, and we're going to go into the directory that contains this project. We'll do a directory here. We'll see all these files. Now this is the Cordova application that we've built. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some tools that we can use from the Cordova command line. Like let's say, for example, well, I know that PhoneGap barcode scanner plugin is broken. And I'm not going to have an opportunity I can't fix it every single time I go ahead and use this. So I'm going to load a different plugin. And in fact, I'll load the plugin that I modified to fix this problem. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is say, using the Cordova command line, Cordova plugin list. And this shows us all the installed plugins for this particular application. And we can see we've got the PhoneGap plugin barcode scanner version 8.1.0. So we can see all the versions and everything we've got installed here. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove that plugin. So we'll say Cordova plugin remove, and that's going to remove it from the project. Okay, I just cleared my screen and I did a Cordova plugin list, and we can see that the PhoneGap barcode scanner plugin is gone. Now I'm going to add a plugin from my GitHub repo. This is the one that I fixed. And we can now see that plugin is installed. Again, we'll just clear the screen here and we'll do a Cordova plugin list. And now we can see that the barcode scanner, the Cordova-plugin alpha barcode scanner plugin is installed. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get out of this. Let's go back into Android Studio, open up that same project. Now notice this didn't change right here, because remember the index file that we fixed? That has nothing to do with that plugin at all. But notice up here, you'll see now the alpha barcode scanner is in here. Okay, the other one's gone. It's not part of this project anymore. And sure enough, when I go to run this application now, I'm going to run it on my Pixel 6. Let me just move that over here so you can see it. And there you can see our order pizza comes up, and our barcode scanner is going to go ahead and work as well. This is the new barcode scanner. So that's all set. So what we showed you was not only how to debug into native code, debug JavaScript code, also how to modify and pull plugins out and add plugins back in to an existing Cordova project without regenerating the whole thing. That can save you an awful lot of time. So getting to know how to use the Cordova command line tools can be very, very helpful. In this segment, we're going to take a look at using the new capability of iOS scripting. So we're going to build an app, and we're going to use the scripting to automatically install the app on the simulator. And so let's go ahead and get started. So this is going to do the same thing that we've been doing, the scan barcode, and this particular component has one error in it, and we'll show you that. So I'll show you how to debug a little bit with it as well. Save and launch the builder. Now in this case, I've indicated that I want to do a debug build. I want to install and run the app after the build. So I'm doing an Xcode CLI build target rather than just Xcode. Deployment target is going to be a simulator. I'd like it on an iPhone 12. I'm using my iPhone developer signing identity and my development team. This is indicated in your, as soon as you log into your member site, you can get that. And I want to do a development build. So let's go ahead and build the app. And that's done. I don't need to see it in the Explorer. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring you into, we're going to bring you into my Mac. So let me go grab my Finder. And here's Finder, and we're on our CLI test directory, and this is the files we just generated. So this build.sh, that is the bash script, and the source. This is all of the assets of the application. So in this case, I'm going to right-click. I'm going to say, give me a new terminal at folder. And if I do, remember I'm Unix now, so I go ls, so likes to list my directory, and we're going to do bash build.sh. This would be the same way you would actually build an Xcode project as well, using the Alpha Cordova iOS app builder. Here we see our plugins being installed and so on. It runs pretty much the same way as if we were building an Xcode project, except there's an extra step that you'll see. When it's done, it's going to say press return to build, install, and run the app on an iPhone 12 simulator. In this case, I want to do that. I hit return, build and run iOS app. Now this is all scripted. You don't really need to understand what's going on here, but there's a lot of magic happening. Build succeeded. It's going to go ahead and launch the simulator. Drag that into view here so we can see it. Here we see our app. And here we go. Now I won't be able to scan a barcode here in the simulator. I'm going to get an error condition if I tap on that because I can't get to the camera. But I didn't see my order pizza alert come up. So I know I got a JavaScript error here. So how can we determine that? So let's go ahead and let's just move this guy over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to launch Safari on the Mac. And just bear with me a second while I bring this over here and size it appropriately. Okay. And then I'm going to pick from the develop window on the top, simulator index.html. So now I'm looking at the index.html file that's generated that's part of this application here. And we're going to just go to the console and do a refresh. And sure enough, we see can't find variable order pizza. Oh, well, where is that located? That's going to be right there. In the index.html file, it's generated order pizza. So we know we've got a problem here. So can we fix it? Or do I have to go back into Alpha, rebuild the application, and and that kind of thing. So the answer is you can fix it. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to do that by now firing up Xcode. All right, first I'm going to just clean up this desktop a little bit. So let's get rid of some of these windows here. And let's get Xcode over here. Now you can see Xcode up and running. We're going to open a project or file. So we're going to go ahead and open the project that we generated. That's going to be under barcode scan 2 iOS files. We open up the barcode scan folder, platforms, iOS, and then here you're going to see this workspace file. That's the one you want to double click on there, and that is going to bring this up in Xcode. So let's just put it right next to that simulator there. And the first thing I'm going to do is change this right here so that it's pointing to my iPhone 12 simulator that's sitting right over here. All right. And so we know we have a problem in our index.html file. And there, if you look at this directory structure over on the left, you're going to see there's a www folder here. And then in the staging folder is another www folder. It's the one in the staging folder that you want to edit. These are the files that have been prepared and are actually going to be used in this Xcode project. How do I know that? From experience. So we'll open this index.html file up, and we know what we're looking for. So we're looking for pizza. So let's just find that, and there we say, yep, we're looking for pizza, and there it is. So here's our function that's failing, the order pizza function, because it's not defined anywhere. So let's just go ahead and modify this, and we'll just say, and we're done with that. Command S will save it. Now let's go ahead and we're going to run it on the simulator. Go to the home screen on the simulator, and I'm going to make sure that we go ahead and we just close that on down. And now we'll go back to Xcode, and we're going to go ahead and run that. And sure enough, there it is, order pizza. So we were able to fix this bug that we had in our HTML in our Cordova app. So what I just showed you was how to debug the JavaScript and how to change it right within Xcode so that we could identify exactly what the problem was and how to fix it. Now, of course, at this point, we'd go back to our alpha project and fix it within the alpha project and regen these files. In the next segment, I'd like to discuss some of the things that I've done recently, things that are coming for Cordova in the near future. Well, I decided that the best way to show you what I've been working on is to show you. So I have some apps that are installed here on the simulator. One of the things that I've been working on was Apple sign on. So sign on with Apple, sign on with Google, and eventually I want to do sign on with Facebook. These are all going to be integrated right into our security. And let's just see what it looks like right now. So I actually have it running. So let's go into Apple sign on and fire that up. Click on login, and here you can see, yeah, I could now log in. I'm not going to do that, but it would work, and we could then tie this into our Alpha security, and so it's simple, a simple login, and you're good to go. You have to include Apple sign in if you're going to include sign in an iOS app, and use Google or use Facebook. So that is a requirement by Apple to submit to the Apple Store. If you use any third-party federated identity, you've got to include Apple as well. So that's important to know. Here's our Google test right here. Same kind of thing. Log in with Google. This would work. There we go. Say continue. And you can see at this point I could log in, and again, this will be all integrated within our own security as well. So that is working. Facebook I haven't done yet, and the reason is because I need to support Cordova iOS 6.2.0 in order to support the login with Facebook. So that is something that became a priority for me, and we're currently using Cordova iOS 5.1.1, and I wrote a WK WebView plugin that we're using for the WK WebView within Cordova iOS 5.1.1. But in order to move forward and make sure that we're not restricting ourselves to plugins that may require Cordova iOS 6.2.0, I decided to try to tackle that, and we actually have that working right now. So this is right here. This is using Instant Update, and it's an app that's running under Cordova iOS 6.2.0. At this point, it's doing everything that we needed to do. We're still using a custom XHR plugin to from the native side handle XHR requests, handle sessions variables and things like that. But this is all working. This little test thing is not going to, I can't access the camera, but here's the in-app browser coming up in Cordova iOS 6.2.0. I can load a manifest. I can then load those files. In this case, it's a video file that would work. And so those are, I think I've got some document files in here and things like that. So that's part of a manifest that I'm loading. And then I can set my session variables, and I can get my session variables. Oh, actually, I don't have the server running, but that's all working as well. So we're in pretty good shape here, and this will be coming soon. So thanks so much for your attention this afternoon, and I hope you learned something.
Well, nice outro there, Bob. Very cool. I like it. Thanks very much for that presentation. Do we have any questions? None have popped up yet during this session. I'm sure quite a lot of it is new material, so that's not surprising. We'll give it a minute. More or less. Oh, that's okay.
I must have just dazzled them.
No, we've got a few. Here we go. One is we use Cordova to deploy for Android. We email our users an APK file to install, and then we use Instant Update to push updates to our users. This works great, except for the case when we do a new baseline build because we had to add a plugin to an app. Is there an easier way to push this update out to users without requiring them to uninstall the old version and then install the new one? Would using the Play Store be a better option here?
What they're doing is the only way you can really do it, other than to publish to the Play Store. So yeah, either one or the other. There really isn't a shortcut there, because you're replacing the whole application. So
Right. Okay. Thank you. Another just quick question is, where did you get the Android simulator for Windows?
the simulator is part of Android Studio. You just have to install it.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Nice.
you can't use it. In my case, I can't use it because I can't use it when I'm running in a simulator on my Mac, because I'm running Windows in a simulator, an emulator.
Right.
So I run Parallels. That's how I run Windows on my Mac. So I actually can't run the simulator on the Windows side of things. I can run it on the Mac side of things. It's kind of
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
The next one is, can we install a newer version of Alpha anywhere, then import the files and use the newer builder without updating the files?
Meaning the components and so on?
I suspect yes. Yep.
Right now, I believe you could do that. Yes. I would recommend, if you had an existing Cordova project, maybe building a new project, because some of the configuration files can change, and it depends on how old that config XML file is. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be any changes at this point to any of those files. When we make a change when we push out the change to use the Cordova iOS 6.2.0, then that's going to require some changes. The JavaScript we generate will actually have to change. So there will be a change there, but that has not been pushed out at this point.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Dan Bricklin has an idea regarding getting people to sideload new versions of the APK, and that is to get people to update to the new APK. You could push an instant update to the old version that pops up a message telling you to get the new one. So it's probably not a bad idea if we do something like that in Transform already from time to time. And generally we use instant updates for everything, but from time to time we do need people to get a new version, and we do tell them to do that. Or sometimes we tell them that they need to simply restart the app, and we have a facility in there. So that's not a bad thing to build into an application.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that looks like it for questions. Dan, thank you very much. Very much appreciate it. I know there's a lot going on with Cordova, and thanks for keeping up with all of it, because it's a lot to keep up with. Coming up at 4:45, so in about 20 minutes, is our final session with Greg Bowling. It's still a surprise. It's called A Bit of Fun. The last 2 years they've been fun, so I think this one will be too. So thank you again, Bob, and all the rest of you, and hope to see you soon in about 20 minutes. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye now.